in a quiet village where the mornings arrived softly and the evenings lingered like a long breath, two hearts carried more than anyone could see. They did not speak of their burdens. They did not lay them out in the open for others to measure or praise. Their sacrifices lived in small, unseen moments, in the early rising before the sun, in the tired hands that kept moving, in the gentle smiles offered, even when the heart felt heavy. There's a kind of love that announces itself loudly, and then there is another kind, the kind that chooses silence. They belonged to the second kind. Each day, they gave something of themselves, a comfort they could have kept, a word they could have spoken, a defense they could have made, but they held it back, not because they were weak, not because they were weak, not because they did not feel, but because somewhere deep inside, they believed that not every feeling must be displayed. Have you ever noticed how heavy, unspoken love can become bident? It does not shout. It does not demand to be seen. It simply stays quiet and steady. And sometimes that quiet can feel lonely. In the stillness of the night, when the world finally rests, the heart becomes louder. Thoughts begin to wander. Questions rise gently. Did anyone notice? Did anyone understand? But when morning comes, those questions are folded away like a letter never sent. The day begins again. The work continues. The silence remains. There were moments when the weight felt almost too much. Moments when a simple word of recognition might have softened everything. A small sign that the sacrifice was seen, but none came. And so they learned to carry their devotion like a hidden stone in the pocket, always present, never displayed. It is not easy to live this way, to give without asking, to endure without explaining, to remain calm when the heart aches for acknowledgement. Sometimes others would pass by without noticing the effort behind the quiet smiles. Sometimes they would speak lightly, unaware of the storms that had already been weathered in silence. And yet, no complaint escaped their lips. Why? Perhaps because they understood something simple, something many forget. Not every truth needs to be defended. Not every sacrifice needs a witness. There is a strength that grows when words are held back. A discipline that forms when emotions are not allowed to spill in every direction. It is not suppression. It is not coldness. It is restraint. Restraint born from dignity. Still, the heart is human, and even the strongest silence can feel fragile at times. On certain evenings, when the sky turned pale and the air felt heavy, they would sit quietly beside each other. No long conversations. No grand declarations. Just presence. And in that presence, something unspoken moved between them. A quiet understanding. A shared awareness that both were carrying more than they revealed. There is a strange beauty in such silence. It is not empty. It is full of meaning, full of unexpressed gratitude, full of sacrifices that may never be praised, yet are deeply real. The world often notices noise. It notices what shines brightly and speaks boldly. but it rarely pauses for the quiet endurance of a steady heart. And so they continued, not for applause, not for recognition, but because their love did not depend on being seen. They had chosen a quieter path, a path where strength was not measured by how loudly one speaks, but by how gently one holds pain without passing it on. And as the days moved forward, their silence became less of a burden and more of a quiet companion. It did not crush them. It shaped them. In that small village under the watchful sky, two hearts carried their invisible sacrifices with grace. No audience, no witness. Only the steady rhythm of giving and the quiet courage to continue. There comes a time when silence is noticed, but not in the way one hopes. When quiet endurance is misunderstood, when the stillness meant for reflection is mistaken for weakness, they began to see it slowly, almost imperceptibly, in the way others looked at them, in the small murmurs that followed their passing. They whispered, they pointed, they assumed, and yet the assumptions were never accurate, never complete. The truth of what they carried remained hidden, like a flame behind thick glass, visible, yet untouchable. Have you ever felt the weight of being seen, but not truly understood? It is a strange kind of ache, one that does not shout, but presses softly against the chest, reminding you of your solitude. For every small act of quiet courage, there seemed to be someone ready to twist its meaning, to make it appear fragile or unnecessary. They watched silently as opinions formed around them. They noticed how easily people misjudged the depth of their restraint. It could have been discouraging. It could have led to bitterness. But they did not allow it. Instead, they observed. They let the world show them its misunderstandings as though these were lessons, not obstacles. There is a subtle torment in being misread. To give without recognition, to care without recognition, to speak without your words being heard in the way you intended. And yet, there is also a quiet education in it. It teaches patience. It teaches endurance. It teaches endurance. It teaches the strength that comes from not needing to explain every action, every thought, every heartbeat. When they felt the eyes that questioned, the voices that judged, they would close themselves gently within the space of their own hearts. Here, nothing could harm them. Here, no misinterpretation could reach. And in that inner space, the calm grew, soft but unshakable. Sometimes the misunderstanding came from those who thought they knew them well. Friends, neighbors, people who believed they understood the rhythm of their lives. And yet, understanding is a delicate thing. It cannot be demanded or forced. It must be earned, often through long observation and quiet trust. And sometimes it may never arrive. They began to notice a pattern. The more they tried to clarify, the more the world insisted on seeing what it wanted to see. Words, explanations, defensive, all seemed insufficient, almost intrusive, against the assumptions already in place. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they realized that silence, though often misjudged, held a certain freedom. What is freedom, if not the ability to carry oneself without being swayed by misunderstanding? What is dignity, if not the decision to remain composed when others have misread your heart? In those quiet moments, they felt the truth of their own presence. They did not need to justify themselves. They did not need to argue or defend. The quiet power of observation became their refuge, their teacher. There were days when the whispers stung, moments when the careless words of they could have cracked their resolve. And yet, even then, they held the stillness, breathing slowly, letting the air pass through them without retaliation. It was not indifference. It was not coldness. It was a choice to rise above the smallness of misunderstanding, to preserve the integrity of the self. Have you ever noticed how strong the heart becomes when it is not constantly defending itself? How clarity grows when one stops explaining, when one stops reacting? They discovered it slowly, almost by accident. The calm within, once merely a shelter, began to feel like a quiet strength. A strength that needed no witness, no validation, no applause. And as the days continued, they found a strange comfort in being misjudged. It allowed them to see themselves more clearly, to know the depth of their patience, the steadiness of their resolve, the quiet courage it took to remain unchanged by fleeting opinions. Misunderstanding became a mirror, reflecting not the world's view, but the unshakable stillness within them. By the time the sun had traveled across the sky, many mess, they no longer felt the need to correct or explain. The whispers passed, the assumptions lingered, and yet their hearts remained calm, composed, quietly certain. They had learned that silence, even when misunderstood, could be a shield, a teacher, and ultimately a companion. It is a subtle lesson, almost invisible, yet profound, that the true measure of strength is not in being understood, but in holding your own truth quietly, tenderly, without seeking approval, that the world may never see what you carry. And that is not failure. That is grace. And in that quiet endurance, they began to feel something new. Not relief, not triumph, but a gentle, steady peace. The peace of knowing that even when misunderstood, they remained entirely themselves, entirely whole, entirely calm. In the quiet of their small village, moments arose that tested the heart in ways words could not reach. Tao felt it first. A gentle pressure when the world seemed ready to provoke, to question, to demand a reaction. There was a sharpness in the air, subtle but unmistakable, and yet he did not speak. He did not defend. He did not respond. He simply watched, felt the stirrings within, and chose stillness. It is strange how much courage it takes to remain calm, how much strength it requires to let the tide of emotion pass without letting it carry you away. He felt the temptation, the quiet voice inside that whispered, "You must answer. You must explain. You must explain. You must make them see. But Tao listened instead to a deeper voice, one that spoke softly, patiently, without fear. Ayi, too, knew the weight of holding back. She felt the sting of misunderstanding, the pull to justify herself, to show the world that her choices were not weakness, but careful, quiet power. And yet, like Tao, she chose restraint. She breathed slowly, noticing the rise and fall of her own heartbeat, the gentle rhythm that reminded her that she could endure without proving anything. Have you ever wondered why silence can feel so alive? How it can contain more than words ever could? In those moments, Tao and Ayi discovered that silence was not emptiness. It was a presence, a force, a quiet strength that grew steadily, almost imperceptibly, within them. They began to see that every word withheld, every reaction not given, was not loss, but gain. Each pause, each gentle refusal to respond to provocation, shaped something unseen, but unbreakable. It was as if the stillness itself carried a light that no misunderstanding could dim. And yet, it was not always easy. There were evenings when the heart ached to speak, to defend, to explain the depth of feeling that lived inside. But speaking would have been like throwing a stone into calm water. It would disturb the balance they had carefully nurtured. And so, they remained quiet, not out of fear, but out of an understanding that restraint itself could be a form of power. Have you noticed how the strongest trees bend in the wind, yet do not break? How rivers flow around stones instead of smashing against them? They learn to move like that. Flexible, patient, steady. To let the currents of life pass without losing the center that held them grounded. There were moments of temptation. Moments when they would provoke, unknowingly or deliberately, and the instinct to react would rise sharply. Tao felt the warmth of anger, the desire, to correct, to assert. But in that warmth, he paused. He felt it fully, acknowledged it quietly, and then let it drift away like smoke. I did the same, feeling the tension in her chest, the urge to speak, the impulse to clarify her intentions, and still she let it pass. She felt the quiet triumph not in making others see, but in seeing herself clearly. The clarity came not from victory over others, but from victory over the self. Strength, they realized, was not in action alone. It was not in the volume of one's voice or the sharpness of one's reply. True strength lived in patience, in observation, in the calm courage to endure without disturbance. It was a power that no one could take away, because it existed entirely within. And in those quiet moments, they began to notice something remarkable. The world continued on its way, unaware of their restraint. Yet, something shifted inside them. A deep calm settled like a steady flame. A gentle confidence that no judgment, no misunderstanding, no provocation could unsettle. It was not pride. It was not triumph. It was a quiet knowledge, a recognition of the inner power that comes from choosing stillness over reaction, dignity over dispute, restraint over impulse. They had discovered a kind of strength that was gentle, yet immovable. Have you ever felt that quiet certainty, that inner knowing that nothing outside can diminish your center? That is what they felt. Every calm breath, every patient pause, every withheld word added to it. It grew slowly, softly, like water carving stone, invisible yet undeniable. And as days passed, they no longer measured strength by how others reacted to them. They measured it by the steadiness of their own hearts, the calmness that remained even when storms approached. In choosing silence over reaction, they had discovered something profound, a power that was neither loud nor high, but enduring and entirely their own. In that stillness, Tao and Ayi understood what many never do. That the deepest strength comes not from showing the world who you are, but from knowing it yourself. That the quiet heart can hold more than noise ever could, and that in restraint lies a gentle, lasting power that speaks for itself. In time, something gentle settled over them, a quiet understanding that did not need words. They no longer felt the pull to explain themselves, to justify their choices, or to make the world see the truth of their hearts. It was as if the long practice of stillness had shaped them into something calm, something steady, something unshakable. Have you ever noticed how a heart can grow quiet and strong at the same time? How it can hold everything it has endured without trembling, without seeking applause or recognition. They discovered this slowly, day by day, in the small spaces between sunlight and shadow, in the soft rhythm of ordinary life. Their silence had become more than the absence of words. It had become a companion, patient and unwavering. It was a shelter from judgment, yes, but also a source of quiet clarity. Within that calm, they began to see themselves more fully, not as others might see them, but as they truly were, steady, resilient, and whole. Sometimes the world still murmured around them. Assumptions, questions, and opinions drifted by like autumn leaves on a gentle wind, and yet they no longer reached for them. They did not correct, they did not displain, they did not defend. They simply watched with a soft awareness, letting the world move as it would while their hearts remained still. There is a certain freedom in this, a freedom that does not shout, that does not demand attention. It is quiet and gentle, but it is as real as the earth beneath one's feet. They felt it growing in the spaces where they had on. Felt doubt or frustration. Each breath became a reminder that they were enough, that their worth was not tied to being seen or understood. Have you ever wondered what it is like to carry your own peace within, untouched by the judgments of others? It is not a loud triumph. It does not announce itself. It is not even a feeling at first. It is a quiet knowing, a soft settling of the heart that tells you, finally, that you are complete as you are complete as you are. They began to notice small moments of joy that had nothing to do with recognition. The sunlight falling across the earth in the morning, the sound of leaves brushing gently in the wind, the simple act of moving through a day without tension, without the need to react. These moments, once overlooked, now felt profound. They were the quiet gifts of a heart unburdened by the need to prove itself. And in these moments, they understood something timeless, that self-respect is not something given by others. It cannot be borrowed or demanded. It is grown quietly in the choices to remain calm when provoked, to remain dignified when misunderstood, to remain true when the world expects a different response. There were no grand celebrations for this understanding, no applause or recognition. Yet, it was more valuable than any outward praise. It was an inner peace that required no witness, no validation, no proof. It existed entirely within them, solid and enduring. Sometimes they would sit together, not speaking, yet fully present. In those shared silences, there was no loneliness. There was understanding, a quiet reflection of what they had discovered in themselves, a soft acknowledgement that the strength of restraint, the depth of patience, and the calmness of inner power were treasures beyond measure. And as the sun moved across the sky and the days passed, they no longer felt the need to react to the world's misunderstanding, sore judgments. They had learned that the greatest power is not in changing the world, but in shaping the heart. That the deepest freedom is not found in being recognized, but in recognizing yourself. Have you felt that calm that comes after long endurance, that gentle settling when all the noise fades and the heart knows its own truth? This was theirs. A calm that did not boast, did not demand, did not seek. It simply existed, steady and unwavering, like a quiet flame in a dark room. In the end, they no longer measured their days by the opinions of others, nor by the reactions they provoked. They measured them by the steadiness of their own hearts, the gentleness of their own breath, the quiet certainty that they were enough, just as they were. And in that certainty, there was peace. Not a loud, triumphant peace, but a soft, enduring one. A peace that came from the choice to remain quiet, to remain true, and to honor oneself above all else. A peace that spoke softly, yet said everything.